The following is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to anybody dead or alive is purely coincidental. So, this story came up the other day when my cousins and I were chatting. It was a chilly winter evening. The sun had set, and we all gathered to sit down with our steaming cups of cha. My brother Asif sat down with a plate of pakoras and shingaras. And then he said, "Y'all want to hear a spooky story?" He asked, raising his eyebrows. The rest of us perked up at the question. "Of course!" I exclaimed. "Spooky stories and cha? That too during this cozy winter evening? Sign me up!" So Asif Dada cleared his throat and began. My childhood best friend shared this story with me. This is something that happened to him. We all diverted our attention to him. As you know, my best friend Samir visited Bangladesh last year. It's been years since he had visited. Plus, he was getting married to his longtime girlfriend, Avantika. So this was the perfect opportunity to visit family and invite everybody. The ceremonies were planned to take place in Bangladesh and India. This is important, so remember this part. Dada took a sip of his cha and continued. Samir had been staying in his family home. You know, the house in Kulchi Hills? Uncle, as in his dad, used to visit Bangladesh every year. But then he stopped about 7 or 8 years ago. This detail is also important. Dada, are you telling us a story or giving clues to a puzzle? My cousin Niharika asked. Aha, dekhbi to keno, ekটু ধৈর্য ধর. Translation, you'll see, be patient. Then he continued. So, as I was saying, Samir was staying at his childhood home in Kulchi. One winter evening, he was relaxing at home, sipping his cha and listening to a horror podcast. What was the name? Right, it was called Late Night Station. Suddenly, his phone started to ring. He quickly got up and checked to see who it was. However, it read no caller ID. He shouldn't have answered the call, Niharika said. AJ, ishtarer jhank, I'm trying to tell you a story, so keep quiet. Dada grumbled. If you know Tenida by Narayan Gangopodhai, that's exactly what my brother looked like at that time. I mean, he resembled Tenida. Niharika mouthed a story, putting a finger over her lips. Anyway, Samir, despite the hesitation, answered the call. He heard a man reply from the other side. He could not recognize the voice at first, but then the man introduced himself as Jamshed, as in uncle's chacho, Samir's father's chacho. Samir obviously was both happy and a little taken aback because he called after so long, because he had not heard from Jamshed Dadu or any of his family members in the last 10 years. Hassan uncle, Samir's dad, had tried to get in touch with Jamshed Dadu, but to no avail. Samir was excited, and so asked Dadu how he was doing, how everybody was doing. Jamshed Dadu sounded very happy and even invited Samir over. And my best friend excitedly agreed. Dada took a sip of his cha and continued. He left the next day to meet Dadu. Apparently, they had moved from their old house to a new one. They had all moved back to the old house, as in like the one where Jamshed Dadu grew up in. It's located in Bandarband, but I don't exactly remember where in Bandarband, though. I have to ask Samir about that. Dadu suggested Samir calls him when he reaches this restaurant, what was the name? Koshba. So Samir did as he was instructed to and called Dadu once he reached the restaurant. Dadu had sent his caretaker, a man named Bishu, to fetch Samir. Samir followed Bishu and drove up to the entrance of Jamshed Dadu's house. Samir said the house looked pretty much brand new, despite being over a century old. You know the old-timey Jomidar baris in Bollywood movies? That's exactly what the house looked like. Samir went up with Bishu and rang the doorbell. An elderly man opened the door. He looked to be about 70. It was Jamshed Dadu. He was quite tall, about 6 feet, probably even more than that. Jamshed Dadu greeted Samir and asked him to come inside. Samir told me he felt as if he was taken back in time, or he was at the set of a movie. The decor inside was picture perfect. Dadu was very happy to see Samir and asked him to sit down. Samir asked about everybody, his fupa, fupi, chachu, chachi, everyone. Dadu told him that they're on the way. They arrived soon enough. Samir felt emotional, almost like a sense of loss, when he saw them. Naturally, everyone was excited to see him. They all chatted and ate. They had a great time. He even invited them to his wedding. At the end, when everyone had gone to bed, Dadu showed him where he was supposed to stay that night and asked him to take a seat inside the bedroom. And then he gave him a manila folder. There were property papers inside. Of course, Samir was shocked. So, Samir asked his grandfather as to why he was giving him the papers, and Dadu told him that he was the only person that he trusted these papers with. I have a question, Niharika asked. Yes, what's up? asked Asif Tata. How come Dadu didn't trust his own kids? She asked. That's because they had moved overseas and there was no scope of them ever visiting Bangladesh again, Dadu replied. As I was saying, Samir asked as to what he was supposed to do with these papers. And his Dadu pretty much told him that he could do whatever he wanted, as long as it was for the benefit of the community, as long as it was for those who needed it, like a women's shelter or an orphanage. Samir agreed. He promised himself and Dadu that he would try his best to keep Dadu's request. The next day, Samir woke up and found that the house was completely empty. He called everyone, but not only that, no one picked up, but the automated voice even said that the numbers were no longer in use, every single time. Samir came out of the house and looked around to find nobody. Then he saw a man who was approaching him. He looked surprised to see Samir and asked, Bhaiya, are you lost? Samir told him that he was visiting his grandfather, and the man looked very surprised, saying that no one has lived in this house for at least 7 to 8 years. Samir was taken aback and turned around to find an abandoned building. The house looked as if no one had lived there for years. The metal gate was covered in dust and rust. One door was hanging onto the hinges, barely. He thought he would fall to the ground, but the man caught him. Samir could not believe his eyes. I don't even know how he managed to ask questions because I would have broken down then and there. The man then explained to Samir that there used to be a family of 6 here originally, an elderly man, his wife, and his kids, along with their respective spouses. The kids and the spouses left the country and they occasionally visited. However, he doesn't know what happened after the visit the last time. One day, they just all disappeared. The light in one bedroom would sometimes turn on, but it's been a few years since that has stopped too. Samir asked the man, how long has it been since they were last seen? And Samir said that he felt as if his heart was thudding loudly against his ribcage. And the man told him that it had been about 7 to 8 years. Samir somehow managed to come home, but he did not tell anyone about what happened except for his fiancée Avantika and me. He only told Uncle about the part where Jamshed Dadu gave him the property papers, but hid the rest. I mean, what is he gonna say anyway? Baba, the house I lived in turned into an abandoned building out overnight? Avantika and I had asked him as to what he plans to do with the property papers. Samir told us that he would keep Dadu's wish, and that's exactly what he did. He turned the house into a women's shelter. Wait, were the papers Jamshed Dadu gave Samir Bhaiya related to the house that he was living in? Niharika asked. Yes, and that's exactly what struck Samir as even more odd. It was overwhelming. All of it. Soon enough, the day of the wedding ceremony arrived. We were all in Delhi by then. Samir looked happy, but lost the entire time. He told me that he didn't know what to expect. Will he see Jamshed Dadu at his wedding? I still remember the look in his eyes the following day when he told me what happened at the ceremony. He was sitting beside Avantika and his eyes were searching for Jamshed Dadu when he finally saw them. Jamshed Dadu was there, his kids, Sasha and Umit were there, along with their partners. They smiled at him and waved. Then Samir saw them disappear before his eyes. Dadu's eyes were filled with unshed tears now. Sorry, but just... Samir got really emotional when he was telling me all this, and I got emotional too. I still get emotional when I think of it. Love is something so pure and strong that it forever connects you with your loved ones. Probably even beyond death, it seems. Wait, does that mean who Samir Bhaiya saw were the ghosts of Jamshed Dadu and his family? Exclaimed Niharika.